For centuries, the story of Africa has often been told by others through the lens of outsiders. These narratives have focused too much on poverty, conflict, and crisis. But Africa is so much more than this. Africa is a continent of over 50 countries, each with its own unique cultures and histories. Yet for too long, the true African story has been sidelined. A time has come for Africans to reclaim their narratives. From literature to film, African creators are stepping forward to tell their own stories that reflect the diversity, struggles, and triumphs of African life. Writers like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie and filmmakers in Nollywood like Kunle Afolayan and Kemi Adetiba are redefining the narrative, exploring everything from migration to the intersection of tradition and modernity. The stories are not only challenging outdated stereotypes, but are also empowering Africa's youth, building pride and a sense of belonging. We're now joined by author and journalist Ejiro Umukoro for a chat on the need for true African stories to be told, particularly using the art to tackle social issues. Ejiro, it's good to have you, as always.
As always, Nii, thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure.
Very good. So, why should we tell true African stories, you think?
We know ourselves better. We understand our stories. We have the voice. We have the context. We understand the dialogue, the psychology of it. Sometimes the realism versus our aspiration for what can be possible. And if you understand that African spirituality is a theme even in our own psychoanalysis of how we deal with each other, it is a part that is not often captured by Europeans who write stories about Africa. And when you disconnect us from who we are, the essence and the beingness of ourselves, what happens is you create a people who no longer know, one, their identity. So they have things like distorted identities. They have cases of misalignment in terms of purpose, in terms of contribution, in terms of service, in terms of where do I stand in the global conversation here and why I am enough as an African and my story matters. Yes.
Now, you've told African stories for some years now.
Yes.
Was there a defining moment? At what point did you realize that our stories are being misrepresented or underrepresented?
So one of the things that I know that investigative journalism has given to me, and specifically long-form narrative journalism, was it opened my eyes to understand that everyday beats news doesn't capture enough. But when you do long-form narrative storytelling in forms of journalism, that format, what happens is you delve deep into issues. 2020, the year of the COVID-19, was the period that marked for me that moment where I realized that when people don't come to your country to tell stories, it is easy to have conjectures. And what has happened over the years are more of conjectures, stereotypes, what people said, third hands, kind of middleman storytelling, and then in a more distorted perspective, where somebody tries to twist a story based on just one incident, and then they expand it and make it look like it is beyond that, and make that as a theme, the one single storyline. So what happened was, during that period, COVID was happening. Gender-based violence was the other pandemic that was happening within the pandemic. And when that began to occur, I began to take stories from South Africa. I went as far as Sweden. I went to Ghana. There were countries I went to in Morocco. I transversed throughout the COVID-19 to the continents across the world. And one thing I realized that we all have similar stories, but in the way they manifest is what is different. The context is key. The characters, how they play out matters. Then the other behind-the-scenes confusion in terms of factors that drives these conversations also make us aware that if we don't tell our stories, it won't be distinct from the others because we all have distinctive stories, even though they may be similar. And when I did that, that was when I wrote my first book, The Distortion, that got the recognition by the United States Agency for Global Media, where they said this story is so powerful, it represents the capturing of how life was at that time. Yeah.
All right, Ejiro, beyond literary works, all right, we're seeing more Nigerian films gaining international attention.
Yeah.
And are they reflective of our social issues and the way of life? It's us telling the story now.
So here's my thing with African film. I'm going to distinguish the African storytelling film two ways. There's the traditional old, Nollywood on the one side. And then there's the new emerging storytellers, film writers, like the like of Afolayan you mentioned. Yes, and yes, what they have done, when you watch Figurine, for example, the way the story was so well told, you could see how they captured African spirituality. The dialogue was authentic. The characterization of the people were detailed to a very large extent. It's not like what you used to have in old Nollywood, where the characters were a bit catboyish, and then the histrionics are just insane. And sometimes you look at how, because the script writing is not so detailed, right? You see the flaws play out. Then they have, in a way, transported too many stereotypes that we have seen manifest. Yeah. So what has happened for me is that old Nollywood, right, has shaped the present behavior, mindset, psychology of our current generation. And we need to change that. What new Nollywood is doing is that, one, it is representing both the loud, the extraordinary, the vibrant, the exciting, the diverse voices and stories within the Nigerian space. So it's not just, it's Western or Niger Delta. Yeah. You see Northern stories coalesce in the space as we are, because we're such a diverse society, and having that kind of variety being expressed in the thematics manifestations of this, the dialogue, the settings as well are richer, and then the voodooism, which is often misunderstood and not well told, the juju in us, because there's a good juju in us, but it's not well told as you should be told. So that twisted way or distorted form in which these stories are told, I am seeing a change in that, and you are now seeing more authentic, real life happenings. It's not a case of ancient Asian storytelling anymore, where, we don't even get the correct description and depiction of how ancient Nigeria was, in terms of the clothing, the behavior, the mannerisms they have, the culture that surrounds it at the time. You just see somebody cooked up something and said, this is olden days Nigerian story. I'm like, nah. So for me, I love the sequence that is happening, but this is where I think the big deal is. Yeah. In writing stories, like my newest book, The Distortion of Adasa, what it did for me was this. You have to go to where the story is. You have to contextualize it. The characters have to be real. They are not two-dimensional. And then the dialogue must convey exactly what it is. You want to draw your readers in. And that manifests in script writing. Most of the time, what we see also happening is that the depth of the scripting is not as strong and pronounced as it should be. And that's why you see gaps in the storytelling. Continuity is not as it should be. These are areas we can improve upon, for goodness sake. We just started like how many, decades ago, but we're getting there. But we should say that in the modern time, there's no reason to say we are trying to get there. We need to be here now.
Interesting. I like the way you're drawing us into your world of art and how you create all of those, pictures. But how do you balance cultural authenticity with universal appeal when crafting your stories? For instance, you talked about your latest book, The Distortion of Adasa. How do you do all of that? Especially, we see a lot of people trying to tell African stories, and then the names do not even, depict the Africanness that you expect.
I know. And that's where it's key about scripting. One, what story do I want to tell? Who are the characters in the story? Where is the setting? Why does this story even matter? What are the nuances driving the story? What is the politics here? What is the cultural appeal here? What is the tendency amongst the people in that space? You have to do your research. Storytelling requires deep research. And one of the stories I've done with The Distortion of Adasa is the story of 11 children who have been targeted by their community and families. And what are they doing? There's a theme running in Nigeria. And what is that theme? Tagging and distorting the identities of young children who we do not understand, calling them witch. In Akwa Ibom, it's so prevalent. In Eastern Nigeria, we see that. In Western Nigeria, we also see that. In Northern Nigeria, it's also pervasive. We are distorting the identities of our children. So what I now discovered was, I did a research with a team of psychologists. And then we got deeper into the conversation of what is it we're missing that we quickly give these children these distorted identities. And I realized that because we did not understand part of psychology of the human mind with relation to audio perception, right? And even somnambulism, sleepwalking. People don't understand all of that. We're like, oh, these are things we don't understand. So we tag them witches. And in tagging them witches, we create stereotypes. In creating stereotypes, we create caricatures of people. In creating caricatures of people, we also do not give them the proper labeling. When labeling are not right, like you noted, it can be very traumatic, even in the storytelling.
All right. Hopefully, through these literary works and, of course, in entertainment, and of course I was even going to ask about the issue of theatre, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Ejiro Umukoro, author, journalist, a pleasure having you here again.
A pleasure too, having me here too. Thank you so very much.
All right.